In this talk, we are going to learn about how animals are able to move. Animals are organisms that belong to the domain of eukarya and the kingdom of Animalia. All animals are multicellular eukaryotic heterotrophic organisms. Animal bodies show a hierarchical level of organization. As true with all organisms, the body of animals is made up of cells. However, different cells come together to form tissues. These cells that form the tissues usually arise from the germ layers. Now, different tissues can come together to form organs, and different organs can work together as part of an organ system. Organ systems are usually assigned specific functions that will allow the organism to survive, reproduce, and grow better. Some of the organ systems present in animals are the nervous system, which allows the animals to perceive their environment and respond to it. The musculo-skeletal system, which is a combination of the muscular system and the skeletal system, which promotes movement in animals. The digestive system, which enables animals to obtain nutrition. The circulatory system, that is able to transport different types of substances to the different parts of the animal body. The respiratory system that promotes gaseous exchange. The excretory or urinary system that is able to remove soluble waste from the body, especially when they are nitrogenous waste products. The endocrine system, which is an intricate system involving hormones that is present for the well-being of the body. The integumentary system, which includes the organ like the skin. The reproductive system that enables reproduction in animals. When we look at the different organisms on Earth, not all organisms can move, and hence they are called as sessile. These organisms are unable to move because they're attached to a solid support or a substrate. On the other hand, there are other organisms that are able to move from one location to another. They are able to do so passively through physical forces like air or water, and in such cases this is called as passive drifting. For example, the flying squirrels that are there cannot technically fly, but they're able to glide through the air in order to show that flying effect. There are other types of organisms that are able to actively move from one location to another, and hence are called as motile. The ability to move from one location to another provides many benefits to the organism. It helps in the acquisition of food and finding new niches and habitats to reside in. It also helps the organisms to escape from threats. And thus, mobility has evolved in different types of organisms. The phenomenon of motility, which is the ability to move from one place to another, is observed in both unicellular as well as multicellular organisms. In the case of unicellular organisms like prokaryotes and protists, the motility is achievable using specialized structures. An example of such specialized structure is flagella, which are these long thread-like structures that are observed in both bacteria as well as protists. Even though flagella is observed in bacteria and protists, the composition is different, where in bacteria it is made of the protein called as flagellin, whereas in the case of protists, the flagella is made up of microtubules. Archaebacteria also show the presence of a flagella-like structure called as an archaeolum that allows mobility in these prokaryotes. Another type of specialized structure that aids in motility is cilia. Cilia are short thread-like structures that are found in protists, and they are structurally similar to flagella. They are also made up of microtubules, but the way they move is different from flagella. Flagella is known to have a propeller-like motion that aids in motility. However, in the case of cilia, they exhibit a back and forth beating motion that promotes motility in the organisms. Pseudopodia are another type of structure formed by protists. In the case of pseudopodia, there is a reorganization of the cytoskeletal fibers of the cell that creates these finger-like projections that allow movement of the organism. Multicellular organisms like fungi and plants are non-motile, and hence they cannot move from one location to another. It should be noted that plants are able to move their body parts like leaves. However, they cannot physically relocate themselves from one location to another, and hence are considered as non-motile. When we look at the animal world, some animals are sessile, while most animals are motile. Examples of sessile animals are sponges. These animals are unable to move because they are attached to a solid support or a substrate. Motile animals can be passive drifters like young fish and some invertebrates, or they can be actively motile like the ants that we can see in these pictures. Different animals can move in different types of media. For example, there are animals that can swim in water. There are other types of animals that can show a variety of movements on land, like they can crawl or hop or walk or run or even jump on land. And we can see different animals that can also fly in the air. In each of these scenarios, this movement requires muscle tissue that is anchored to the body skeleton. The skeletal systems form a supporting structure for the muscles, and there are three types of skeletal structures. The first one is called as a hydrostatic skeleton, which is found in soft-bodied animals like earthworms. The hydrostatic skeleton is a fluid-filled cavity, which in turn is then surrounded by muscle, which includes circular as well as longitudinal muscle. In organisms that show the presence of a hydrostatic skeleton, there are waves of circular muscle contraction that is followed by longitudinal muscle contraction. These contractions cause changes in the body shape and moves fluid up and down the body that enables in the movement of the organism. A perfect example of an organism that has a hydrostatic skeleton is the earthworm. Another type of skeletal system is an exoskeleton, which is an external hard covering. The exoskeleton, as shown here, is seen in arthropods and nematodes. It is able to protect the internal structures of the animal, but it also provides attachment sites for muscles. These muscles are present inside the organism and are able to attach to the exoskeleton. The endoskeleton is another type of skeletal system, which is present in the form of internal structures that form the body's framework in some animals. The endoskeleton provides attachment sites for muscle and can be made up of cartilage or bone. Endoskeletons are commonly seen in echinoderms as well as vertebrates. Bones are present in many different types of vertebrates that include some fish, all amphibians, all reptiles, all mammals, and all birds. Bone is a type of a hard living connective tissue. In the case of mammals and reptiles, the bones are called as vascular bones because they have a blood supply that provides nourishment to the osteocytes that are present in the bones. On the other hand, fish and birds do not have a blood supply to the bone, and hence their bones are called as avascular bone. The living nature of bone is evident because bone is known to be able to undergo remodeling. When there is a force applied to the bone can undergo changes like becoming thicker. In fact, when people have weaker bones, they are usually asked to do some sort of weight training in order to make the bones thicker and stronger. Skeletal muscle tissues present in the animal attach to the endoskeleton in order to promote movement. These movements occur in regions called as joints, which is the place where one bone meets another if we are considering an animal that has bone as its endoskeleton. In the case of vertebrates that have bones, there are different types of joints that have been observed. A fibrous joint is an immovable joint where the bones are joined together by dense fibrous connective tissue. Since the connective tissue is very dense, it doesn't allow the bones to move, and hence it is an immovable joint. Another type of joint is a cartilaginous joint. These joints are partially movable, and in this case, the bones are joined by cartilage. Synovial joints are the ones that enable movement. They show the presence of a fluid-filled joint cavity, which ensures that the bones do not contact one another, and this is what enables movement. In order for movement of bones to occur, the skeletal muscles must be able to attach to different bones or parts of the exoskeleton. This is what allows for movement to happen. The muscle can attach to the bone or to the cartilage through these tendons, which are dense connective tissues. We do have some scenarios where muscles can attach directly to the outer covering or the periosteum of bones. Muscles are able to promote movement through the process of contraction. When we look at how the muscles attach to the endoskeleton, one end of the muscle remains stationary, which is called as the origin, while another end of the muscle is able to move the bone or the structure that it is attached to. And this is called as the insertion. When the muscle contracts, it generates a pulling motion that causes movement of the bone. It should be noted that muscles can only contract and thereby generate a pulling mechanism. They cannot push or stretch, and hence the body has different muscles that can counter each other and thereby provide different ranges of motion. For example, our biceps is a type of a flexor muscle, and when it contracts, it's able to bring the lower arm closer to the upper arm. On the other hand, we also have triceps, which are extensor muscles, and when they contract, they are able to counteract the motion of the biceps and thereby move the lower arm away from the upper arm. This type of flexor and extensor muscle is not only seen in vertebrates like us, but we see them even in invertebrates like insects, where we are able to see the flexing of one of the appendages when the extensor muscle relaxes and the flexor muscle contracts, while we're able to see the extension of one of the appendages when the extensor muscle contracts. In order to understand how muscles work, it is important to know their architecture. Skeletal muscles are made up of these structures called as fascicles. Now, each fascicle is made up of a bundle of muscle fibers. It should be noted that even though the name is a muscle fibers are actually individual muscle cells. These muscle cells, or muscle fibers as they are called, contain many myofibrils. The myofibrils are made up of myofilaments, which are composed of two main types of filaments, the thick myosin filaments and the thin actin filaments. Both actin and myosin are proteins. Muscle contraction occurs because the thick myosin filaments are able to slide past the thin actin filaments, which ultimately results in filament sliding and thereby contraction of the muscle. For skeletal muscles to undergo contraction, they must receive a signal, and this signal comes from neurons. In fact, we have motor neurons that are in close proximity or in contact with muscle in locations called as the neuromuscular junction. When the time is right for the muscle to undergo contraction, the neuron will release a bunch of molecules. These molecules will cause changes in the muscle fiber that results in the thick myosin and the thin actin filaments sliding past one another. This sliding will result in the myofibril undergoing contraction and ultimately the muscle fiber undergoing contraction. When enough muscle fibers undergo contraction, the entire skeletal muscle will undergo contraction. Now that we've learned how skeletal muscles function, let us look at the types of animal locomotion. Animal locomotion, especially in large animals, involves two types of locomotion, which is the appendicular locomotion that is produced by appendages that tend to oscillate, or axial locomotion. In the case of axial locomotion, the locomotion is produced by bodies that are able to change their shape. The bodies can undulate, pulse, or undergo peristaltic waves to aid in locomotion or movement. There are different animals that are able to move in water. In the case of water, the buoyancy present reduces the effect of gravity. Thus, in order to go forward, the frictional drag of water has to be overcome. In these situations, the body shape plays a really important role. We have seen plenty of organisms that have streamlined bodies, which helps lessen the frictional drag of water. While many marine animals and fish have streamlined bodies, we do have other types of marine invertebrates that move about using hydraulic propulsion. In this case, they will squirt out fluid that provides them with the force in order to move in water. Some other strategies that are employed by animals to move in water include swimming. In this case, the animals push against the water in order to move in the water. They can use their entire whole body for movement, which is what is observed in the case of eels, or they can use a part of the body for movement, like just using their posterior fins, which is what we can see in different types of fish, including trout. Some animals, like us, use all their limbs when they would like to move in water, while some other animals will just use their hind limbs in order to move in water. In such situations, these animals, like ducks, usually will have webbed feet. Other animals use their forelimbs to propel themselves in water. And in such situation, these forelimbs are usually modified as flippers. We can see this with penguins, seal, otters, and other types of animals. There are many animals that are able to move inland. Now, the air is less dense than water, and hence it is gravity that influences the movement of animals inland. Animals use different strategies to move on land. For example, mollusks can simply glide through a path of mucus in order to move. On the other hand, arthropods and vertebrates have jointed appendages that they push against the ground that allows them to move. Now, in the case of arthropods, they have at least 6 legs that are jointed appendages, but there are others that can have more than 6. For example, spiders can have 8, and we have the centipedes and millipedes that have numerous appendages. These extra legs can increase the stability of the animal body while it moves, but it does reduce the maximum speed at which the animal can move. While arthropods have a minimum of 6 appendages, vertebrates have 4 appendages because they are tetrapods. Now, arthropods and vertebrates can also leap or jump, and in these scenarios, they use their rear legs to propel themselves in the air in order to accomplish that jumping or even hopping motion. Some animals have achieved the ultimate feat in motility, which is to be able to move in air. The ability to fly evolved among animals 4 times. Insects, bats, pterosaurs, and birds all show the ability to fly. This is an example of convergent evolution, where these organisms who arose from different ancestors and belong to different animal groups were able to evolve a same type of condition, which was the ability to fly. If we try to group organisms based on their ability to fly, this would comprise of a polyphyletic group, since all these different members arose from different ancestors. When we look at how the body evolved for flight, we can notice that bats, pterosaurs, and birds modified their forelimb to form a wing-like structure. In the case of bats, the wing is built on multiple supports, and these supports are the finger bones of the animals. However, in the case of birds, the wing has been built on a single support. And thus, even though both bats and birds are able to fly, we are able to see that the body has evolved differently in order to achieve this. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about the different types of organ systems in animals, as well as the different types of organisms based on their ability to move. We also learned about the strategies employed by unicellular organisms to move, as well as the strategies employed by multicellular organisms to move. We learned about the different types of skeletal systems, which include a hydrostatic skeleton, an exoskeleton, and an endoskeleton. We also learned about the roles of muscles in movement and how animals are able to move in different media like water, land, and air.